There's no way to explain what it's like watching your brother die. Not just get sick. Die. Every breath he took sounded like a battle, like his lungs were trying to fight their own collapse. It was the kind of thing that changes you. You stop caring about small stuff like HOA paint codes or lawn heights. All you want is peace, dignity, and a little time. That's what I thought we'd have. My brother Ryan was only 42, way too young for any of this. The cancer hit fast and spread, faster. 1 month he was playing backyard football with my son, and the next he was hooked up to machines, barely able to sit up in bed. When the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do, we made the decision to bring him home. Hospice care wasn't a luxury for us. It was a necessity. He didn't want to die in some sterile hospital room, and I didn't want that for him either. So I moved him into my house. We set up a room downstairs so he wouldn't have to deal with the stairs, and I tried to make everything as comfortable as I could. I took time off work. My wife rearranged her whole schedule. Friends brought meals. Everyone did what they could. Everyone except the HOA. Our neighborhood has always been a little uptight. You know the type. Trim your hedges exactly or get a notice. Can't park a work van in your own driveway. Heaven forbid your trash bins be visible for more than 45 minutes after pickup. But we figured this wasn't about broken rules. It was about life and death. The hospice nurse, Lydia, started coming by every morning and evening. She was kind, gentle, and damn good at her job. She helped Ryan through the worst of his pain, gave him back a little dignity, and helped me and my family hold it together. She was a blessing. I mean that with everything in me. Her visits became a routine. She'd park in front of our house, just like any guest would, and head inside for an hour or two. Nothing disruptive, no noise, no blocking anyone's driveway. Just a professional doing her job and helping my dying brother through the hardest part of his life. But about a week into this, I found a letter taped to our door. At first, I thought it was a sympathy card. Maybe one of the neighbors had sent something kind. Instead, I opened it to find an official-looking notice from the HOA. A warning. Repeated instances of unauthorized street parking have been observed in front of your residence. As per Section 4.3b of the HOA regulations, non-resident vehicles may not be parked on the street for extended durations or on a recurring basis. Please ensure all guests use designated guest parking or risk enforcement action. I actually laughed. This had to be a joke, right? I mean, who looks at a hospice nurse coming to help a terminally ill man and thinks, let's enforce parking rules? Who reads a situation like this and thinks, well, technically, but I didn't want trouble. I figured maybe this was just a miscommunication. So I called the number listed on the letter, expecting a rational conversation. I explained that Lydia wasn't some guest overstaying her welcome. She was essential medical care. I even offered to send them documentation if they needed it. The woman on the phone didn't care. She didn't even sound like she was listening. Sir, the rules are in place to maintain order for all residents. Exceptions can't be made arbitrarily. Arbitrarily. That's the word she used. It took everything in me not to lose it right then. I bit my tongue, told her I'd see what I could do, and hung up. That night, I parked my car farther, down the block, and left the space in front of our house open for Lydia. The next day, I got up early, cleaned up the yard, and even made coffee for when she came by. I wanted to show the HOA we weren't trying to be difficult. She showed up right on time. Parked, came inside, checked Ryan's vitals, gave him some medication, and sat with him while he tried to smile through the pain. An hour later, she was gone and everything seemed fine. Until the day after that. Lydia called me from her cell phone, sounding panicked. I think they towed my car. I ran outside, heart pounding, and sure enough, the space where she always parked was empty. No glass, no sign of damage. Just gone. At first, I thought it had been stolen. That would have been awful enough. But when we called the police, they said it had been towed by our own HOA. Apparently, they had logged the car as habitually violating guest parking rules and authorized its removal. No warning, no knock on the door, just gone. I couldn't believe it. I drove Lydia to the impound lot and paid the fee myself. $285, just like that. I kept apologizing the whole time. She kept saying it was okay, but it wasn't okay. Not even close. When we got back home, Ryan asked what happened. I lied. I told him her car had a flat and she had to get it checked out. What was I supposed to say? The people who run this neighborhood think parking enforcement matters more than your life? That night, I sat outside on the porch, just staring at the street. That space, that stupid strip of asphalt, had become a battleground. One side wanted to help a dying man. The other wanted to enforce a line in a rule book, and I knew right then I wasn't going to let it go. You never forget the look on someone's face when they realize their car is gone. Not just misplaced or parked somewhere else, but gone. I still remember the way Lydia stood frozen at the curb, eyes wide, hands still holding her medical bag, like it could somehow fix the situation. She kept scanning the street like maybe she just got the spot wrong, but I knew the truth already. I'm so sorry, I told her, rushing outside. They actually towed it. She looked at me like I had just spoken in a different language. Towed? Who? The HOA, I said. They left a warning a couple days ago. I tried calling. I thought we were okay. I'll never forget her expression after that. Not angry, just exhausted. The kind of tired you get when the world keeps kicking you while you're trying to help it. She didn't deserve any of this. She was here to make a dying man's last days more bearable, not to get caught up in some petty neighborhood turf war. She shook her head and sighed. Do you think they knew I was a nurse? I told them, I said. They didn't care. We stood in silence for a minute before I offered to drive her to the impound lot. She hesitated, like she didn't want to inconvenience me further. But what other option did she have? On the drive, I could feel my hands tightening on the steering wheel. I kept playing out fake arguments in my head. Things I should have said. To the HOA. Threats I should have made. It all just burned in me like gasoline waiting for a match. At the impound lot, Lydia had to show her ID, fill out paperwork, and pay the fine, which I insisted on covering. $285 plus another $50 processing fee, all for parking on a residential street to do her job. She was quiet on the way back. I could tell she was trying to stay professional, but I saw her wiping at her eyes at one point when she thought I wasn't looking. When we pulled up to the house, Ryan was awake. He noticed the tension right away. What happened? Before I could answer, Lydia gave me a small nod, like she was letting me off the hook. Flat tire, she said. Had to get it towed. Ryan gave a weak chuckle. Figures. Can't catch a break around here, huh? I tried to smile, but it felt fake. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to tell him how the HOA didn't care that he was dying, that they were more concerned about street parking than human decency. But what good would that do? He was already dealing with enough. After Lydia finished her visit, I made some calls. First, to the HOA. Of course, I didn't get a person, just a voicemail. Hi, this is Jared in Unit 41. You towed a hospice nurse's car. Not a guest, not someone throwing a party, a medical professional helping my dying brother. You knew, I told you, and you still had it towed. This isn't over. You've crossed a line. I hung up and immediately typed up an email. I attached the hospice agency documentation, Lydia's credentials, even a statement from the doctor confirming Ryan's care plan. I CC'd every board member I could find on the directory, then I posted on the neighborhood Facebook group. The HOA just towed the hospice nurse caring for my terminally ill brother. They knew why she was here. They chose to do it anyway. This isn't about rules, it's about cruelty. Within an hour, the post had over 30 comments. Most of them were on my side. Unbelievable. I had no idea Ryan was sick. So sorry. This is disgusting. Rules are supposed to help, not hurt. I've had issues with them too. Glad someone's finally speaking up. But then, right in the middle of the thread, came him, HOA president, Brad Whitaker. A man who somehow managed to be condescending even in writing. While we sympathize with your situation, the HOA has rules in place for a reason. All residents are expected to follow them, regardless of personal circumstances. If you feel a mistake was made, you may request a formal review at the next board meeting. Sympathize? Sympathize? I was shaking as I read it. I typed and deleted at least 5 different replies before finally writing. You knew she was a nurse. You towed her anyway. You've made your priorities clear. A few neighbors defended Brad. Said things like, he's just doing his job. Or, if we start making exceptions, where does it end? But most people weren't having it. This is inhumane. Hospice care isn't a party. It's end-of-life support. There should have been an exception. You think your inconvenience is bigger than someone dying? That's messed up. By that evening, the post had exploded. Word spread fast. My wife got texts from other neighbors offering to help, even from people we hadn't spoken to in months. A local mom dropped off food. Another neighbor offered to let Lydia park in their driveway. People were furious. But the HOA stayed silent. No apology. No refund. No nothing. I walked into Ryan's room that night and found him sleeping. Peacefully, for once. Lydia's meds were working. His breathing was less strained. His color looked better. And I just sat there in a chair next to him, staring at his face. All we had wanted was time. Not trouble, not conflict. Just a few quiet weeks so he could be around family and die with some dignity. But the HOA had made a choice. They'd drawn a line in the sand, and they made damn sure I saw it. Fine. Now they were going to see mine. The next morning, I stood outside the HOA office, holding a printed copy of Ryan's hospice plan, Lydia's nursing license, and a letter from the care agency. Everything I'd already sent by email. I wasn't going to wait for a board meeting 2 weeks down the line while my brother was dying in real time. It was one of those small HOA buildings squeezed between a dog park and a community mailbox hub. Looked more like a glorified utility shed than a place of power. But make no mistake, these people wielded control like it was a weapon. Inside, the front desk was manned by a woman named Pam. Late 50s, thick glasses, and the kind of fake smile that vanishes the moment you blink. She barely looked up from her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, voice flatter than a parking lot. "I'm here about the nurse's car. The one your board had towed while she was providing care to my terminally ill brother." Her fingers paused on the keyboard. She glanced at me and sighed like, "I'd just told her the printer was jammed again. You'll need to file a complaint in writing." I did. I emailed every board member yesterday. I included documents. Not one of them replied. "I want to speak to someone. Today." She gave me a tight-lipped smile. "The board doesn't handle unscheduled walk-ins." I slammed the documents down. On the counter, not hard, but enough to make her blink. "Read it. Just read it." Pam hesitated, then pulled the top sheet closer and scanned the heading. Her face shifted just slightly. Recognition, maybe guilt. But then it snapped back into that practiced blank expression. "I'm sorry," she said in her best customer service monotone. "But we're required to treat all residents equally. If exceptions are made, he's dying." I didn't yell, but my voice broke halfway through the word. "My brother is dying in my house right now. That nurse was there to make sure his last days weren't filled with pain and fear. And you had her car towed like she was some party crasher." She opened her mouth, probably to parrot more policy, but I wasn't done. "You think this is about equality? The HOA makes exceptions all the time. You let the president's cousin park a food truck in the cul-de-sac for a whole weekend. You look the other way when Mrs. Evans has her bridge club over and they take up half the guest spots. But a nurse parks quietly for 2 hours a day, and suddenly it's a crisis?" Silence. I took a deep breath, picked up the papers, and tried. "One last time, a little softer. Just be human, please. Let her park there. Let my brother have his peace. He doesn't have much time left." Pam looked down again. "You'll need to wait for the board to vote on any policy exceptions." That was it. That was the moment. Not the towing, not the fee, not the email. Silence. That one sentence, cold, rehearsed, delivered like I was asking to bend the rules for a barbecue, was the breaking point. I turned and walked out, hands shaking. By the time I got home, I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. And anger gives you clarity. It cuts through the fog of grief and frustration. I realized something simple and ugly. They didn't care. Not about Ryan. Not about Lydia. Not about any of it. They were hiding behind rules because it was easier than admitting they were wrong. Because if they admitted one exception was justified, It would unravel their whole illusion of control. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. I took a photo of Ryan's hospital bed, just the bed, the machines, and the quiet sunlight through our front window. Then I posted it on the neighborhood Facebook page again, this time with a caption. "This is where my brother is spending his last days. Right here, in our home." The HOA knew that. They knew the nurse who comes to care for him was here on medical business, and they towed her car anyway. If you think that's okay, ask yourself what kind of community we're trying to be. Then, I added every document I'd shown Pam, redacted for privacy, but enough to prove this wasn't some made-up sob story. I even linked a short video from the Hospice organization explaining end-of-life care. This time, it really took off. By lunch, the post had over 100 reactions. By evening, someone had shared it to the town's next-door group. Messages started pouring in. Neighbors, old coworkers, even a reporter from a small local station. People were furious. The word inhumane came up again and again. And yet from the HOA, still silence. Until the following morning, an email from Brad Whitaker, HOA president, landed in my inbox. The subject line was, "Re-social media post. Regarding parking violation, not regarding hospice care. Not regarding your dying brother. Just parking violation." It read like it had been drafted by a lawyer. Sterile, defensive, and full of phrases like, "We understand your frustration," and "unfortunate misunderstanding." They offered to waive the next HOA fee as a gesture of goodwill. That was it. No refund for the tow, no apology, just a quiet attempt to sweep it under the rug with $150 in hush money. I didn't reply. Instead, I updated the Facebook post. They offered to waive one HOA payment. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement that they caused harm. Let that speak for itself. The comment section lit up again. Someone dug up other horror stories. Times the HOA fined residents for tiny, harmless things. Someone else mentioned starting a petition. Another neighbor printed my post and taped it to the HOA office door. I didn't ask for any of that, but I won't lie. It felt damn good. And through all of it, Ryan stayed quiet. He knew something was going on. He could sense the tension in the house, even if he never asked. Maybe he was sparing me. Or maybe he just didn't want his last days to be about battles and bureaucracy. But I made him a promise that night, as I sat by his side. I won't let them erase you. I won't let your last days be buried under their rules. They're going to remember this. Because this wasn't just about a towed car anymore. This was about dignity, and I was done asking for it. By the time I hit send on the reporter's email, I knew there was no going back. It wasn't a long message, just the facts. My brother was terminally ill. A hospice nurse had her car towed by our HOA with full knowledge of why she was parked there. And they had refused to apologize or make it right. I attached everything I had. The documents, the Facebook post, even a short video I'd taken of Lydia walking up our front steps with her medical bag in hand. Less than an hour later, the reporter replied, "This is unbelievable. Can I stop by this afternoon for a short interview? We'd love to run this tomorrow if possible." That was the moment it all started to snowball. At 2:15 p.m., a plain white news van pulled up outside our house. The reporter was a woman named Melissa, late 30s, sharp eyes, and the kind of voice that could cut through noise without ever raising in volume. She introduced herself, offered her condolences, and asked me gently if I was ready. I was. I didn't want to play victim, and I sure didn't want pity, but I did want people to know. We set up in the living room, careful to keep Ryan out of frame. He was asleep during most of it, his chest rising and falling slowly, peacefully. The camera stayed focused on me and the window behind me where Lydia had walked in that morning, after parking down the street again, just in case. I told Melissa everything, no dramatics, just the truth. How Ryan was only 38. How his cancer had come out of nowhere and taken over in just 5 months. How he'd begged me not to let him die in a hospital. How we turned the guest room into a hospice suite. And how Lydia came every day to help with pain management and emotional support. And how the HOA had decided that her car, parked for 2 hours outside my house, was more of a threat to the neighborhood than the fact that someone was spending his last days on Earth behind that window. Melissa just nodded and let me talk. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to guide me. And when I showed her the email response from Brad, the one offering a waived fee instead of an apology, she shook her head. "I'd like to reach out to the HOA for comment," she said. "Fair warning, they might panic once this goes live." "Good," I told her. "Let them." That evening, the teaser went up on the station's Facebook page. Coming up at 10. A family's heartbreak deepens when a hospice nurse's car is towed by the HOA. Was it a simple mistake or something far worse? By morning, the full segment had aired, and that's when things really blew up. The story was only 3 minutes long, but it was enough. Melissa cut together the interview with footage of our quiet neighborhood, shots of Lydia walking in, and a still frame of the HOA office, which had its blinds drawn shut like it was hiding from the world. She read Brad's official statement on air, too. The HOA regrets any confusion caused by enforcement of long-standing parking regulations. We strive to treat all residents equally and cannot make individual exceptions without due process. Confusion. Due process. People were furious. The neighborhood group exploded again. This time, it wasn't just residents. Strangers from the next town over started chiming in. Folks who had lost loved ones to illness, who had gone through hospice, who understood what we were dealing with. One woman commented, "When my dad was dying, we had nurses coming in and out every day. If someone had towed their car, I would have lost my mind. I cannot believe this HOA thought that was okay." Another wrote, "It's the dehumanization that gets me. Like they couldn't even pretend to care." And right in the middle of it all, silence from Brad. Silence from Pam. Silence from the whole smug board that had so proudly stood by their equal enforcement. But it wasn't just comments and shares anymore. A retired veteran from our street came by with a clipboard and said, "We're starting a petition to recall the board. Enough's enough." Someone else stapled printed versions of the news article to the HOA office door. A mother down the street offered to coordinate meal deliveries for our house while we focused on Ryan. Even Lydia seemed different when she arrived that morning. She gave me a tired but grateful smile and said, "It's about time someone stood up to them." That was the first time I actually felt a little hope. Not for Ryan, his time was still slipping fast, but for the principal, for the idea that maybe, just maybe, we weren't alone in this anymore. But then came the retaliation. Late that afternoon, I received a formal violation notice taped to my door. Hand-delivered, no postage. Violation, unauthorized signage in front. Yard, description. Homeowner is displaying signage critical of the HOA without proper approval. Fine, $75. They were referring to a small handwritten sign my wife had placed in our flower bed. It said, "Compassion, Policy." That was it. That's what they considered a violation worth fining a grieving family for. I laughed out loud when I read it. It wasn't funny, but it was so cartoonishly cruel, I couldn't help it. These people didn't just lack empathy, they lacked shame. I took a photo of the notice and posted it on social media again. The caption was short and direct. "They fined us for a handmade sign that says Compassion Policy. This is what we're dealing with." That post went viral. It got picked up by a regional news blog. Then a national account that covers HOA overreach stories. And within a day, someone started a GoFundMe titled, "Support the Family, Standing Up to HOA Cruelty. I Didn't Ask for Money." But the kindness poured in anyway. Donations, messages, stories from other families who had fought HOAs while dealing with death or disability. The battle wasn't just mine anymore. It had become something bigger. A moment where people collectively said, "Enough." Still, through it all, Ryan was quiet. Calm. Fading. He smiled at me when I told him about the news story. He squeezed my hand when I said people were standing up for him. "You always were the fighter," he whispered. "I just wanted peace." "You're going to get it," I said. "One way or another. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice." The apology came 3 days after the news story aired. It wasn't heartfelt. It wasn't even personal. Just a stiff email from the HOA board's shared account, subject line in all caps. "Official HOA statement regarding recent media attention." I opened it with the kind of exhausted caution I'd developed from dealing with them for the past 2 weeks. Inside, a wall of text tried to spin their actions as a misunderstanding, blaming inconsistent communication procedures and reaffirming their commitment to fairness. Then, buried 3 paragraphs down, was the line, "We apologize for any distress caused to the homeowner and their family during this difficult time. Any distress." Like Ryan's final days being turned into a circus of stress and policy arguments was just an unfortunate bit of distress. They didn't mention the nurse by name, didn't acknowledge the tow, didn't address the fine for the compassion policy sign, which we never paid. But still, people in the neighborhood treated it like a victory. Some of them came by to celebrate. "You did it," one guy said, clapping me on the back like I'd just won a court case. "They finally backed down." I nodded. I thanked him, but inside, I felt hollow. Because by then, Ryan was gone. He passed quietly the night before the email came. Lydia was there, and so were my wife and I. The pain meds kept him calm. His breathing slowed hour by hour until it stopped completely just after 1 a.m. No drama. No last words. Just silence. I sat by his side for an hour after. Couldn't move. Couldn't speak. I wasn't ready. Not for his death. Not for the strange calm that followed. We'd spent so much time fighting. I almost didn't know what to do once the fight was over. The next morning, while the world buzzed about Facebook posts and local news stories and angry comment threads, I was picking out an urn. A week earlier, I would have said I hated the HOA, that I wanted revenge, that I hoped every board member had to face public shame for what they'd done. But in that moment, all I wanted was for it to matter, not the outrage, not the headlines, just the truth. That a man named Ryan spent his final days surrounded by love. That his family fought like hell to make sure those days weren't drowned in red tape. That the people who tried to treat him like a line item on a violation form had to face what they'd done. And maybe, someone would learn something from it. 2 days after Ryan passed, I stood in front of a packed community hall. Melissa from the news station had offered to speak, but I told her I'd do it. The neighborhood group had organized a community conversation to address recent concerns about HOA conduct. It wasn't about yelling. It wasn't about revenge. I just wanted them to see him. So I brought a framed photo of Ryan, one from before the diagnosis, before the weight loss, and the hospital bed. He was smiling, holding a guitar in one hand and a beer in the other, laughing at something off camera. I set the photo on the podium. Then I spoke. "I'm not here to talk about parking policies," I began. "I'm not here to debate fines, or bylaws, or what the rules say. I'm here to talk about humanity." I told them about Ryan, about his diagnosis, about the way we transformed the guest room, about Lydia, and how she made his pain bearable when nothing else could. And yes, I told them about the car, about how the HOA knew she was his hospice nurse, about how they towed her anyway, about how they refused to say the word sorry until a news crew and 1,000 angry neighbors forced their hand. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just spoke. And when I finished, I looked directly at Brad Whitaker, who was sitting 2 rows back, arms crossed. "You didn't have to care about us. You didn't even have to like us. But you had a chance to be decent, to see a person in pain and show just a little grace. And you chose to hide behind policy. You chose to turn a dying man's final days into a battle over a parking pass." The room was silent. No one clapped. No one shouted. But I could see it in their faces. Some ashamed, some angry, some deeply moved. Afterward, a few people hugged me. Others just whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time in weeks, I believed they meant it. The board met privately that night. A week later, Brad resigned. So did 2 other members. They replaced them with neighbors who promised to never let something like this happen again. They rewrote the parking policy, created an emergency exceptions clause, drafted new procedures for compassionate care visits. It was all too late for Ryan, but not for the next family, not for the next person fighting through the fog of grief, just trying to keep their loved one comfortable. Lydia still visits sometimes, not to work, just to check in. She brought flowers after the memorial, said she still thinks about Ryan's calm smile, even when his body was failing. He wasn't scared, she told me. Most people are, but not him. He was just ready. Now, the compassion policy sign still sits in our yard. Little faded, a little weather-worn, but still standing. And every time I look at it, I remember the promise I made. They wouldn't erase him, and they didn't.